The first time Jonah saw the house, he thought it was a trick of the heat, a mirage. The dry wind scalded his skin as he slowed his truck, dust clouds curling around the tires. It stood off the dirt road, an old stone cottage soaked to its bones, glistening with fresh rain. Every leaf around it was crisp, every blade of grass dead. And yet the cottage dripped. Rainwater slithered down the mossy roof, pooled in black puddles, and hissed when it touched the dry earth. He stepped out. The smell hit him: wet soil, copper, something older, like rot trapped beneath floorboards for years. Drawn by a pressure he couldn't name, he approached. Each step felt heavier, like the air was thickening. The porch sagged under his boot. Cold radiated from the wood. A wind brushed past him, carrying whispers, not voices, but syllables, unfinished and wet. Inside, the light changed. The windows glowed pale blue. He glimpsed a child's drawing pinned to the wall, a house bleeding under black clouds, stick figures drowning in rising water. Jonah blinked. For a second, the house seemed smaller, harmless, just empty, old. The door creaked open, and the illusion broke. The scent grew sharper: rust, blood. The floor shimmered with thin puddles. One wall glistened and then pulsed. Not wood, flesh. He stumbled back. He tasted metal on his tongue, then bile. Something was wrong with time. Shadows stretched and curled unnaturally. He reached for his keys. Gone. His hands trembled. Something ancient lived here. Not a ghost, not a curse, something buried, forgotten. He remembered stories from old townsfolk. It comes for the thirsty, they'd muttered. Never answer when it rains from a clear sky. The rain on the roof stopped, but inside, water still dripped. And now, something was walking upstairs. The house sagged beneath a dying willow, its long, black branches tangled like claws. Jonah stepped onto the porch. The wood groaned wetly beneath his boots, like it was trying to speak. The doorknob was slick, unnaturally cold. Inside, the air was wrong, humid, thick, reeking of mold and something coppery. His tongue curled. The taste of old blood clung to his throat. The wallpaper peeled like shedding skin, revealing symbols scorched beneath. A triangle, an eye, a spiral of drowning faces. The floorboards wept. Beads of black water gathered between the cracks, dripping into unseen depths below. With each drop came a soft, persistent whisper, too low to understand, too constant to ignore. You came back, you came back. He wandered from room to room. The furniture glistened. Nothing was dusty. The bed was made. The dishes were wet, stacked neatly. Someone had been here, or still was, in the corner of what looked like a child's room. He found an old book nailed shut with rusted wire, scratched across its cover, "Do not let it in." For a moment, the whispers stopped. Silence settled. Jonah breathed, tried to calm his racing heart. The shadows seemed to retreat. The dripping slowed. Relief crept in. Maybe it was just an old flood-damaged house. Maybe the stories were just stories. Then the walls pulsed. Once, like lungs, a hot wind blew through the hallway, rattling the window panes. A scream echoed from inside the walls, sharp and wet, like something drowning. Jonah fell to his knees, gagging on the taste of bile. He crawled toward the door. His hand brushed the threshold. The door slammed shut on its own. Behind him, a wet footprint appeared on the floor. Then another, and another, headed toward him but upside down, from the ceiling. That night, Jonah awoke choking on air that felt too thick, too wet. At first, he thought it was the heat until he realized he was shivering. Something was wrong. He sat up in bed. The room was dark, still, except for one sound: rain. Not outside, not on the roof, inside. Soft, steady, rhythmic, like droplets falling on wood. But the ceiling above him was dry. He crept to the window. Outside, the stars shimmered. No clouds, no wind. Yet the rain persisted closer now. It was inside. The walls, inside him. He pressed his ear to the floor. The wood was damp. A single droplet hit his cheek. He flinched, touched it. Black, warm, thick, not water. Downstairs, he found his boots by the door, dry on the outside, but the insoles squelched as he slipped them on. Mud caked the soles. He hadn't stepped in mud since visiting the house. He turned away, then stopped. On the wall above the boots was a strange smear, A symbol, crude, drawn in what looked like rusty water, a spiral of eyes. The local stories came rushing back. Old tales told by his grandmother about a spirit that dwelled in soaked earth, bound by drought, released by the careless. The townsfolk used to pour salt at their thresholds, light oil lamps during dry months. Never speak aloud of the waker in the rain. The ritual stopped decades ago. They said the entity slept. Jonah laughed nervously. Just a story, just stress. He wiped the smear clean. Nothing happened. Relief washed through him. He turned to head back to bed, then froze. His hands, still wet, still stained. He stared at his palms, blistered, raw, skin sloughing off like it had soaked too long. And somewhere behind him, the sound of gurgling breath, closer, above the ceiling, or beneath the floor, or both. Jonah couldn't sleep. The rain inside his house had stopped, but his skin still itched with dampness, like the water had soaked into his marrow. He drove to the town's library just after sunrise, desperate for distraction, explanation proof that he wasn't losing his mind. In the archives, he found little. Most flood records had been lost in a fire, handwritten notes explained, but buried in a backroom box of uncatalogued photographs, he found one that drained the blood from his face. A black and white image of the house, same crooked porch, same sagging willow. A family of 6 stood stiffly out front, their faces shadowed beneath black umbrellas. Rain poured down over them. The caption read, "Dahmer Family, 1911. Lost to the soil. As he traced the photo, the room shifted, tilted, and a deep nausea gripped him. His mouth filled with the taste of rot. The photograph blurred, and in its place, a vision surged. A man digging a well behind the cottage. Thunder overhead. The well collapsed, swallowing him whole. His family wept, and then they stayed, year after year, house soaked, faces stretched long with waterlogged grief, eyes empty, but watching. Jonah staggered out, sweating. He told himself it was imagination, just stress, nothing more. But his hands wouldn't stop trembling. His fingernails had turned grayish blue, cold to the touch. On the way home, he stopped at the old general store, asked the clerk about the Dahmers. The man flinched. "You shouldn't say that name," he hissed. "Their house waits for drought, but when the sky breaks it trades places. That's how it feeds." For a moment, Jonah thought he understood. He even laughed, shaky and tired. Maybe knowledge was power. But when he got back to his truck, muddy footprints lined the inside of the windshield. On the inside, pressed into the glass upside down. The next time Jonah returned, the cottage stood in full downpour, though the sky above was blue. The rain fell in silence, drenching the roof, running in veins down the walls. The air around it shimmered with cold humidity, a thick mist rising from the ground like breath. The moment he crossed the threshold, he was swallowed by it. His skin prickled, the hair on his arms standing upright. Inside, the smell was unbearable: wet decay, rusted pipes, stagnant blood. Every inhale tasted like iron. The walls bright clear water from cracks that hadn't been there before, and the wooden beams groaned with a low, animal moan. Jonah stepped carefully, boots squelching. In the parlor, he paused. A small child's voice broke through the silence. "It's almost time." It was sharp and close. He spun around. No one. Only a water-stained hearth. Beneath it floated a child's toy boat, lazily circling in a puddle that hadn't been there seconds before. He stooped to lift it, and as he did, a name caught his eye: Jonah, etched in the hull. His breath caught. The walls pulsed again. One seam split open, not with rot, but something like slick cartilage, pulsing faintly. He backed away, nearly tripping over a warped floorboard. He wanted to scream, to flee, but his body wouldn't listen. His hands were shaking, his mouth full of the taste of wet copper. Then, suddenly, silence. The dripping stopped, the pulsing ceased, the walls stilled. He stood frozen. Maybe it was over. Maybe the house had shown him all it could. He stepped back toward the door just as the hallway behind him creaked. Not footsteps. Breathing. Not beside him, not behind him, but beneath the floor, and faintly, from under the floorboards. One must drown, for the rest to sleep. Jonah returned with gloves and a flashlight. convinced he could prove the house was just rotted wood and damp hallucinations. The rain hadn't followed him this time. The sun was out. The air felt dry. For once, he believed he might be free. But when he stepped inside, the illusion cracked. The heat vanished. The humidity crawled back into his lungs. The door shut behind him without a sound. He forced himself into the kitchen. The tiles were slick with condensation, the walls damp and breathing. His flashlight flickered, catching on a trapdoor in the corner, partially hidden beneath warped floorboards. The hinges screamed as he opened it. A rush of hot, rotting air exploded from below. He gagged. The taste of bile filled his throat. The cellar was steep, cut into stone, slick with moss. As he descended, the air grew thicker, viscous like a swamp. He reached the bottom and found a large trunk, its lid sealed with rusted iron wire and damp cloth that hissed when he touched it. He cut the bindings with a utility knife. The moment the lid opened, the house above groaned like something had noticed. Inside, waterlogged items, a cracked lantern, soaked lace gloves, and a journal wrapped in waxy skin. Pages clung together, but he peeled one loose, a child's scrawl. Read, "Papa says the storm chose us. Mama says we were meant to sink. The house won't let us leave. It said we'd stay until someone else answered." Beneath the journal were 6 neatly folded sets of clothes child-sized. Still wet, still warm. Jonah stumbled back. His light caught the wall. Something had been scratching there from the inside. Dozens of deep, jagged tally marks. And just beneath them, scrawled in rust-colored streaks, 7. The tally marks had always stopped at 6. Jonah ran, clawed his way up from the basement, slipping on the wet steps. Breath caught in his throat. Outside, the sun burned his face. It was bright to bright. For a moment, he collapsed in the grass, dry earth beneath his fingers, gasping. No rain, no whispers, no bleeding walls. He thought it was over. But then he noticed the shadows. His stretched too long, like it belonged to someone taller, older, and in his peripheral vision, the house still shimmered, wet with unseen rain. He drove until the house was far behind him, dirt road vanishing into dust, but the relief was shallow. That night, in his apartment miles away, he awoke to find rain pooling beneath his bed. His pillow smelled of mildew. The walls sweated moisture. His reflection in the mirror flickered. His eyes looked bloated, waterlogged. He screamed at his own face, clawed at the glass. His fingernails cracked, bent backward, gray at the roots. His skin never dried. He couldn't stop shaking. In desperation, Jonah revisited his grandmother's old keepsake chest, half memories, half warnings. Inside, he found an oil lamp charred with old wax and a folded note. "If it follows you, burn what connects you. Do not feed the ground." He doused the wet toy boat in kerosene and lit it in the sink. The flames sputtered, then vanished, leaving only steam. The rain came harder after that. Indoors, only for him, the walls began to bleed. Thin streams of brackish, red water snaked from the ceiling, pooling in his shoes. In a fevered panic, he saw something etched into his kitchen tile. Something new, another spiral, this one open at the end, pointing toward his bedroom. Then he heard it, soft and deliberate. A knock from inside his closet. 3 times, tap, tap, tap. Jonah returned for the last time, or so he told himself. The house was waiting, impossibly tall now, its walls weeping in full storm, though the sky above remained cruelly clear. He stepped out of the truck and was hit by the smell, thick, earthy, decay laced with iron, like old wounds soaked into wood. His breath misted despite the summer heat. Every raindrop hissed as it struck him, like acid. Inside, the house pulsed, the air felt swollen. The walls breathed with him, and sometimes, without him. Water trickled from the ceiling in long, trembling threads, forming patterns on the floor. Spirals, always spirals. One bled. He passed the parlor. The child's toy boat had split in 2. It lay in a puddle that was slowly turning black. From upstairs came the creak of footsteps, too slow to be human. He moved toward the staircase, each step soft, bloated. At the top, a hallway opened into a warped attic space. There, nailed to the wall, was a portrait of the Delmer family, new, unblemished, Only now, he stood among them. Water streamed from their painted eyes. Beneath the frame, a basin carved from stone overflowed with ink-dark water. A journal floated inside. He opened it. The handwriting was his own. "I brought the rain. It waits for a name. One must drown, one must stay. This is how it feeds." He dropped the journal. The attic walls split down the center, revealing a hole deep and pulsing, like a throat. Wind howled from within, carrying whispers in a dozen voices, all weeping, all laughing. Then silence. For a moment, he was alone. The house seemed to sigh. The rain stopped. He turned to leave, and behind him, the hole whispered, "Stay, Jonah. You're already inside." The next morning, the sun rose quiet and clean over the town. Jonah's truck sat on the roadside, dust gathering across its windows, keys still dangling from the ignition. His phone buzzed on the seat. Missed calls, dozens of them, all unanswered. He was nowhere to be found. Search teams combed the surrounding hills, dragging canoes through dried creek beds, sniffing dogs panting in the dust. No tracks, no prints, only the vague smell of mildew lingering in the air where his boots had last touched. Back at the old cottage's location, there was nothing, no house, just brittle grass and cracked earth. No rain had fallen, not here, not anywhere near, except for one patch, one strange, wet patch of soil, perfectly square, still soaking through. The grass around it wilted as if drowned. There was no source for the moisture, no clouds above. A quiet hum radiated from it, low, nearly inaudible, like something breathing. Just below, locals whispered again, the way their grandparents once had. The old warnings resurfaced: never follow the rain alone. Never speak to it when it calls you by name. Superstitions they had abandoned now felt sharp again, newly urgent. Some began salting their thresholds, hanging tin bells in their windows, lighting oil lamps when the nights grew too still. Jonah's apartment remained untouched, except weeks later a maintenance worker entered to shut off the utilities and found standing water in the bedroom, thick, black, and on the steamed mirror, a single message written in a shaky hand: "I stayed. It's a rain." The worker fled. The apartment was never leased again, but no one noticed the puddle outside the front steps, the little toy boat floating in lazy circles, and the faint sound of knocking. Just beneath the floor, 3 taps, again and again. A week later, a young couple passed through the town, tired and seeking rest. The clerk at the gas station warned them against wandering near the old woods. "There's a house out there," he said, voice low and jittery. "It only shows up before the rain. You don't want to see it." They laughed it off, eager for a story. But as they drove down the cracked dirt road, their headlights caught a cottage dark and slick with fresh rain, though not a drop had fallen for miles. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of decay and wet earth, a copper tang lingering on the breeze. The couple stopped. The road around the house was dry, cracked like a broken mirror, but the porch was slick and glistening. The door creaked, opened slowly as they approached. A faint whispering floated out, a soft, insistent calling. "Don't listen," the woman said, clutching her partner's arm, but the sound wrapped around them, pulling them forward. Inside, the walls seemed to pulse beneath their fingertips, cold and slick, like the skin of something alive. The floor was covered in shallow puddles that rippled as if breathing. They stepped back, startled, but the door slammed shut behind them. The whispers grew louder, weaving voices in a language old as the earth. One voice called a name that chilled them both. Outside, the sky remained clear, the sun blazing. The house stood soaked in rain that didn't fall, waiting. The clerk's voice echoed in the couple's minds: "Never answer when it rains from a clear sky." Behind the house, in the cracked soil, the faintest traces of footprints appeared upside down, leading deeper into the forest. And somewhere, just out of sight, the house was waiting again.